Welcome back. Everything is about the President's State of the Nation address that is expected to happen this evening. He will have to once again prove himself to the country. But the governing party is fighting within its ranks and corruption continues to plague the country. There are many expectations for this year's SONA. The President is expected to speak only this evening. For now, I'm joined by public law expert Richard Calland. Thank you, Prof, for your time here on All Angles. Now, firstly, I want to talk about the SIU report that landed on the President's desk, I think around the 10th of December last year, pertaining to PPE corruption, right? It gave him about 60 days, if I remember correctly, to implement some of its recommendations in terms of the NPA, police structures, etc. It's the 10th of February today. It's exactly 60 days to the day. So, I'm thinking maybe the President should speak to reports such as those.
Well, he has to tread quite a thin line on this one, because on the one hand, I think he wants to show that he is the ethical leader who is continuing to rebuild broken institutions and lead South Africa into a much more secure and law-abiding place. On the other hand, he also will want to signal very, very strongly that he is not the person who investigates or prosecutes, that he believes wholeheartedly in independence of the prosecuting authorities, and he will let them get on with their job. That's right in law, but it's also politically smart because, of course, because of his own political party and because so many members of his own political party are implicated in state capture and in PPE contract corruption and so on, he doesn't want to be seen in his own party as the person who is, in a sense, enforcing the law.
Now, in terms of how today he obviously has to put his hat on of being the country's president and not necessarily the ANC's president. But you can't speak about him and the state of the nation in particular without mentioning the ANC and some of these allegations against many of its leaders.
Well, successive presidents from '94 onwards have managed to give the State of the Nation without making any reference to the ANC. Except in election year, they might make reference to key campaign slogans or messages or even strategies. But in general, it's not cool to do so. You stand there as the president of the country, as the head of cabinet, as the head of the executive. And so it really isn't appropriate to talk directly about your own political party. But having said that, of course, he has to win an election this year. At the end of 2022 in December, there's a crucial election within the ANC. He will want to win that because otherwise he will lose power. He needs a second term to complete the job of rebuilding and the turnaround strategy. It's clearly a two-term, 10-year job and not a one-term, 5-year job.
And what do you make, Prof, of... Excuse me, you can carry on.
No. Well, all I wanted to add was that means that when he talks to the nation tonight, he'll want to show positivity. He'll want to show that there are good things happening. To encourage citizens who are, I think, short on hope and concerned about a broken state, but also because he will want to show the ANC, his own party, that he is leading, that he is succeeding, and that he remains the right man to be the head of the ANC and the country.
But it also goes beyond December 2022 and the elective conference within the ANC, doesn't it, Prof? Because he has to also play to what citizens would want to hear. Because 2024, I'm sure he's hoping that the ANC doesn't perform as dismally as it did during local government elections last year.
Well, that's right. He will no doubt be conscious of the fact that his party's grip on power is weakening. As you say, the municipal elections were not good for the ANC. And that's why tonight's speech is probably one of the most important of his political career, long political career. He's had several key moments. I think this is another key moment because the country is in crisis. The state of the economy is as ground to a halt because it was already in a parlous state. The fiscus is extremely weak. He's got to signal that he's still the right man to lead. He has to talk about the attempts that have been made to arrest corruption. He has to speak convincingly, I think, about the ability to grow the economy. And I think it'll be very interesting tonight to see to what extent he places emphasis on this big international climate finance deal, $8.6 billion, which was agreed in principle, at least, in Glasgow at the climate change conference in November. But of course, he faces opposition on that from his own Minister for Energy, Gwede Mantashe, who's the most powerful supporter of the president within the ANC. Again, a delicate path to tread. Everywhere you look, this is a tricky speech for the president, and his speechwriters, I think, will have been working overtime, as always, over the last few days to get the balance right.
And, I just want to talk about something a little light with you, Professor. Looking at the fact that this, as you said, might be the most important, speech of his political career, especially looking at the two hats that he has to wear as ANC president, but also, importantly, actually, as the president of the country. He's also the first president, he's also the first president to speak or to deliver his State of the Nation address at another venue. This particular venue also sharing a very important history with him, in particular, having held that mic for former President Nelson Mandela during his first address after his release in 1990.
That's right. It's an iconic photograph, wasn't it, of Nelson Mandela on that balcony with Cyril Ramaphosa, a much younger man then, of course, leaning across and holding the microphone. A photo that showed just how close to power the centre of the ANC and Mandela himself, Ramaphosa, was. It shows his long journey in the ANC. It goes back a long time. He's steeped in the ANC. He's had a remarkable political career, but he's facing big challenges tonight. He's a cool head, but in fact, I would like to see him show some anger tonight. I'd like him to show that he's upset about the state of the nation, that he shares and understands the hurt that people are feeling across the land, and that he doesn't stand in front of the nation as he stood in front of a burning parliament a month ago and show a kind of measured nonchalance, which I thought was inappropriate. He needs to show boldness, decisiveness, and some passion tonight, I would argue.
A lot of people, Prof, and quite rightly so, are complaining about the lack of growth in the economy, the fact that we've lost so many jobs. Yes, fine, COVID-19 did contribute in the last 2 years, but it really exacerbated the issues that we already have. And the team has something that I just, they've asked me to show the viewers. KFC has advertised a post, and I'm sure the team will show the visuals right now to the viewers. They've advertised a post. It's a single post. And the queue right now outside that particular KFC for that one post is so long. It talks to, the lack of jobs in South Africa. We've got people on our screens with placards talking about how they want South Africans only to apply or get this job. But obviously there are people who are in our country legally. And this is also something that the president should look at tonight, isn't it?
Well, it's heart-rending to see that queue, isn't it? It's distressing, the level of unemployment and the loss of dignity that implies for so many millions of South Africans. Again, the president needs to show that he empathizes in a sincere fashion with them. He's got to show that his government will find the money to increase the social wage, to provide deeper, more meaningful protection of the social security safety net. And he also, I think, has to indicate that there are still plans afoot. There is a strategy to create meaningful growth that creates jobs. And again, I come back to that energy sector and the opportunity space that it provides now for serious reform, serious investment, and better jobs and more jobs. But that's a bold strategy, and he needs to back it. On the other issue, I think, in that photo that we just saw there, South Africans only, it's a delicate moment. There's been a shift in our politics in the last 6 months to a year, particularly in the local government election, with Action SA taking for the first time a xenophobic position in formal representative politics. I think Ramaphosa needs to tell us where he stands on that. Is he moving towards that position himself, or is he remaining steadfast in favour of a non-racist, Pan-African approach to life, which really is at the heart of traditional ANC values? I think he needs to do what Merkel did in 2015 with the refugee crisis in Europe, where she said to Germans, we should not be frightened of migrants. We should be confident of our culture, confident of our ability to grow our economy. But of course, the big difference is that Merkel didn't have 44% unemployment. And of course, South Africa does. So that's the big difference. And it's, as you say, another very tricky and delicate issue for the president.
And it's also important, I think, Prof, for South Africans and especially the youth to understand the importance of a State of the Nation address. I think a lot of people in South Africa are feeling so despondent that they would much rather not listen to any politicians or any political party talk to them about the state of their own nation. And I don't think they understand really how important it is to listen to him today and look at what he said last year and try and see exactly where it's changed, because it'll give you an idea of who you should where you should be politically as a South African.
It's an important moment. It's when the executive comes to Parliament, albeit, of course, this year not the actual Parliament, but a sort of temporary Parliament physically. But symbolically, it's just the same. The executive comes, reports to the Parliament and to the nation, and says, this is the state of the nation, and this is my response to the state of the nation. This is how my government is going to address the challenges we face in the coming year. I think it remains not just a symbolic moment, but an important moment in terms of policy and politics. And yes, I understand there is cynicism, inevitably perhaps, when the country faces such extreme pressure points and crisis. So the President's job is to reassure the nation, offer hope. But that hope cannot be vacuous or platitudinous. It has to be based on some serious strategy and statecraft. Again, very difficult speech to give in that context.
And of course, we've heard a lot of people talk about how beautiful our constitution is in South Africa, and we found a lot of people, especially on this channel, who are analysing, for instance, some of the speeches that different presidents as well as ministers have done, saying that things look great on paper in terms of South Africa and what we're trying to achieve, but political will to implement. I mean, after today, we're going to be talking to you possibly about the budget speech that is supposed to support some of the plans that the President laid out for us this evening.
Yes, and I think when one talks about this period of the year, every year, what we sometimes call the political season, starts with the State of the Nation address, and then a couple of weeks later, there's the budget, and they're two sides of one coin. In my view, the relationship between them is this, that the President, who's the head of the executive, signals his government's intentions and lays out a strategy as a piece of, as I say, statecraft, as a piece of leadership. Then, 2 weeks later, the Minister of Finance comes along and explains how it's going to be paid for, how it will be resourced. And then, of course, a few weeks later, all the ministers come to Parliament and present their budget votes, in which they set out their plans to execute and deliver on the strategy. That's the sequence. And you're absolutely right. Our job as commentators and your job as the media is to shine a light on this, to explain it to the public, to give the public an opportunity to engage seriously with it, and not to abandon it, not to abandon hope, and not to lose interest. And it's tremendously important, in my view, that in a democracy, a vibrant democracy, the public are fully engaged with politics.
And tell me something, Prof. Do you think it's unfair of me to expect the President to say something about the fact that that report into the July unrest landed on his desk, I think, around Monday? Is it unfair of me to expect him to say something about it, and in terms of accountability, especially this evening, about 3 or 4 days later, especially because it was so scathing on, Cabinet and some of those departments that particularly look at the country's security and intelligence?
It's not unfair at all. It was an important piece of work. The July riots last year were tumultuous. They sent shockwaves not just through this country, but globally, in terms of a sort of sense of concern about South Africa's stability, its democracy, and its credibility as a destination for investment. So this is the first piece of evidence we have.
I'm so sorry, Professor. I was so interested in your answer to that question. I unfortunately have to cut our conversation short.